And at 10, moisture sensitive. One of the things that I find to be the absolute dumbest thing about not only these damned suits, but also the FNAF series in general, is how stupid it is that the spring lock mechanisms inside the spring lock suits fail with moisture. Sure, it explains why William gets spring locked because the room was dripping and whatever, the ceiling was leaking, and it makes everyone confused with Crying Child because he was crying. Despite that not being a spring lock failure, everyone thought it was because he was crying and, you know, moisture. But in actual practice, that is a horribly flawed mechanic. Like, if me breathing and sweating is going to make the metal bits snap on me, why would I do it in a hot robotic suit? That seems like a horrible and stupid idea. Like, yes, okay, put me in a hot and sweaty environment that gets me killed if it gets wet. That's not a liability at all. I get sweaty wearing my freaking Doctor Strange costume, okay? Imagine a giant suit full of metal, okay? That would also be heavy as hell to walk around in too, only making the sweating worse. We recently released a short about how Henry Emily from the FNAF series is a moron, and I truly believe this to be the case. And many of you in the comments agreed. However, there was one question that really made me start thinking. Aurelia Pillay under the short asked, how stupid is Henry, and also, who allowed the franchise to continue on without any of the owners? Not even Michael or Charlie survived. And you know what? That's a good enough question that we're actually exploring it today. Alright, let's do it. FNAF 6 was supposed to be the end of the Afton story, okay? That's what Henry sets out to do in this game. That's the whole point of the game. Make sure that nobody remembered what happened there, despite the parents of the victims definitely remembering. However, this dumb figured that the first fire didn't work, so you know what, let's try it again. And in fact, he was so confident in this plan for whatever goddamn reason that he actually lets himself die in this process to leave nobody remembering what happened. But like I said, dude, even if Henry and William are dead and their kids, okay, the parents of the victims still remember what happened. And as we learn in Security Breach, there are other parents who remember it too. Because there's duffel bags citing the 9 missing children from the Pizzaplex as happening, quote, again. If Henry had stuck around to see if the job was really done, like around a maybe like Hearthstone or I don't know, literally anything else, maybe William wouldn't have been able to possess Vanny and then come back yet again to wreak havoc. In at 9, designer. You see, there are a decent amount of people that for some reason think that these spring-lock suits were made with pure intentions. By William Afton. This kind of goes hand in hand with the idea that William started killing after losing his kids, but we know that that's not the case. Since thanks to the fast facts found in FNAF AR's files, we know that the Funtime animatronics were some of the first ones ever made, and considering the abilities of Baby and her comrades, we know that they were made in order to kill, meaning that even if the spring-lock animatronics were the very first animatronics ever, it's reasonable to assume that they were also designed with death in mind, which explains multiple things. But honestly, if William made the fun times with death in mind, it's likely that he did the same with the spring locks, you get me? And if you think that a suit that can snap at a moment's notice and shove pounds of metal, bars, cogs, gears, and chains and more into the same space as your body would be made with pure intentions, you should stop watching these videos and go to a therapist. Seriously. I have a number. The Pizzaplex missing children are a direct result of Henry just being a moron, and you can't tell me any different, okay? He should have lit the place up, smashed everything that survived, and then maybe he could have offed himself, but make sure the job's done first. God damn it, dude. Like, maybe even wait a few years to make sure that it's done, especially when this hasn't worked multiple times before. But you know what? Therein lies the question. Most of Henry's issues come from him opening the restaurants again and again. He even licenses the rights to people who make the FNAF 3 location possible, but after FNAF 6, how could Fazbear's reopen as the Pizzaplex, especially after both Henry and William are considered dead? Well, typically the next of kin would be considered the children or spouse of the deceased, but we know that both Henry and William have no kids, well, that survived, and at the very least that William has no wife. So assuming Henry's wife isn't in the picture as well, what could have happened to the Fazbear rights and intellectual property? Well, as I said in a reply to Aurelia's comment, if the deceased person has no children, the next of kin will move to the parents. After this point, the next of kin includes collateral heirs, or siblings of the deceased. Collateral heirs can also refer to nieces and nephews. So in essence, what that would entail would be giving the IP to the parents of of William and or Henry, most likely Henry because William would have probably been declared dead before this after being missing for 30 years come FNAF 3, but if their parents also weren't in the picture, which would be understandable since like in FNAF 6 Henry would be like 60 at like the youngest, so his parents are most likely dead at that point, let's be real. And it ain't no bonus. The spring lock mechanism is probably the most intuitive thing that FNAF's world invented. The ability to move robotic parts out of the way enough for a human to fit inside is nuts, and while it may be dangerous, we also drive over 100 kilometers or miles, whatever, per hour in huge metal death boxes, so we can't necessarily complain about it. And while yes, they have their faults, there is nothing compared to the ability to be both animatronic and suit. That's an incredible feat of technology, and I'm sure they play into it with the marketing. Like, I mean, we hear the Foam Guy tapes from FNAF 3 talking about these things, okay? And he never mentions a bonus or anything like that for you risking your life with one of these damn suits. And even if you end up getting spring locked, there doesn't really seem to be any compensation package for your loved ones. Hell, if you die, you may not even get your severance. Actually, maybe that's why they do it. Your family can file a lawsuit since, you know, you died on the job, but that's a lengthy court battle against a massive company with a serial killer who has yet to be caught at the front lines. It's not really gonna do much good for your fam. So the fact that you don't get a bonus if you get in one of these suits, let alone get spring locked, no thanks. It's a red flag. Swipe left. And it's 7, Fred Trap. Fred Trap is exactly what you'd expect. It's Springtrap on a yellow Freddy animatronic, okay? The designs are actually scarier than normal Springtrap to me, and I guess maybe it's because bears are scarier than bunnies in general. I think that Scott made William use the Spring Bonnie suit because of how Scott himself was scared of Bonnie, but that's just idle speculation. I also think that originally William was planning on using the Fredbear suit, hence its superpowered jaw, but after Crying Child bit the dust, pun intended, he decided to use the Bonnie suit instead, since, you know, thanks to Elizabeth, he knew that Crying Child might be possessing Fredbear. But he wasn't, okay, and that's also idle speculation, but anyways, it's speculation from a DM who tells stories and knows how to story build, so maybe I'm onto something here. But anyway, there are still more rundown versions of also scrap versions of Fred Trap, which are already terrifying. And at 6, William Afton again. I say again, even though technically Burn Trap was on the list already, but also some may not consider that the same thing. But what I mean is, in the context of this number, it makes sense, okay? Could William have suffered a spring lock failure before getting trapped in the Spring Bonnie suits like we see in FNAF 3? You know what? It's possible. And it explains why I said again. It certainly appears that way in the FNAF novels, because William is described as having scars that are consistent with a springlock failure before becoming Springtrap in the books. So, could it have happened in the games? I doubt it. The reason we think it could be possible is because we hear of an incident at a sister location that has multiple and simultaneous springlock failures, so maybe that could have been William, okay? There are plenty of people that it could have been, but William having to deal with it would definitely get them put out of commission, at least for a time. But then, considering how he kept using the suit afterwards, I doubt it, because, you know, trauma, but again, he's a psychopath, so. Halfway through into number 5, Grim Chica. The first Springlock victim in the Final Nights series, Grim Chica is a primary antagonist in Final Nights 3, Nightmares Awoken. Unlike the others, she's not a Reaper animatronic, which is a good thing because Jesus Christ, those things are horrifying. But Grim Chica holds a strong appearance to the Springlock suit posters in the Night 3 cutscenes, but her faceplates are very hard to spot, and she's almost entirely purple. Purple, you know that, you know purple! The glowing accents inside of her resemble a human corpse, because of course it does. She lacks a bib. She's very slim, like Toy Chica, luckily, except for the hips, which appear to be much wider because, you know, she's got to give birth to those dummy thick Chica babies. And it's also revealed that Grim Chica is a springlock in the museum level, saying, quote, a victim of a springlock failure forever forced to haunt the suit she was wearing. I don't get it, man. Like, why? Why would you do this to Chica? I put this on the list instead of Grim Freddy because, well, I mean, like, it's Chica, okay? And look at what they did to my girl. Okay, well look at what how they massacred my girl Chica. Alright, it's rude. So then we'd have to think about any siblings Henry may have, and it is certainly possible in the game story, since thanks to the Silver Eyes, we actually got confirmation that Henry has a sister named Jenny. Jenny Emily, otherwise known as Aunt Jen, is a character in the novel The Silver Eyes, The Twisted Ones, and The Fourth Closet. Being the sister of Henry Emily, Charlotte is her niece. After the passing of Charlie's father, Charlie was actually taken and cared for by Aunt Jen. However, you may think that this is all solved. It's not, because there's one caveat. Aunt Jen was killed by Circus Baby as she was impersonating Charlie in The Fourth Closet. Spoiler alert, but I mean, even I haven't read the books, so I don't think you'll care at this point. Everyone who's going to read the books has read them, so. And seemingly, Aunt Jen didn't really have any children of her own, so unless there's some random extra brother or sister out there that we haven't heard about, Henry has no living relative. So what happens after that? Like, if there's no actual family? Well, in the event that the court cannot determine who your next of kin is, guess what? Oh yeah, everything you've worked your whole life for becomes property of the state. Yeah. And with Utah typically being a red state, you best believe they'll be selling that IP to whoever wants to pay enough to actually reopen Fazbear Entertainment. This also would explain why William keeps getting away with everything, because I'm guessing, especially in this exaggerated form of story, the police must have been pretty easy to bribe. Hit it for shadow animatronics. One of the oldest theories is that the shadow animatronics are the first Springlock victims, and this comes to us after FNAF 3's phone guide dialogue that mentions multiple and simultaneous Springlock failures, which some interpreted as multiple Springlock suits failing at once instead of multiple Springlock mechanisms within one suit. So the line of multiple and simultaneous Springlock failures could mean either multiple of the Springlocks inside one suit failing at the same time, or more than one Springlock suit failing at the same time. This led some to theorize that previous employees were killed in the Springlock suits, which is where the shadow animatronics come from. This is supported by the fact that these are versions of Freddy and Bonnie, the two animatronics who do have Springlock suits, but I'm pretty sure this was disproven by Scott at some point, or at least he mentioned that it was wrong. Sorry, there are also multiple holes with the theory, but anyways, shadow animatronics still pretty cool. Paperwork. One of the worst things for the survivors after a Springlock failure has to be the paperwork that is associated with it, because goddamn, someone dying in your building is one thing, someone dying in your building because of something in your building is another, and then add on to that the fact that they were your employee and probably forced into that suit without, like, because of their contract, and you'll be filing reports until you have to retire. Okay, especially because one mistake on those papers means like even more paperwork, and I don't really know anyone who likes to do paperwork. Personally, I hate it, but that's also because my ADHD makes me like, it makes it unbearable for me, honestly. Like, it's even tough to write scripts sometimes, but I mean, eventually I have to, but like that's where my brain thrives, you know, in that stressful environment, which is not good for my health. But if it was that kind of paperwork, I would honestly just quit, because there was no way in hell that I would even want to attempt to keep my focus on that when I can just scroll through TikTok or YouTube instead. So yeah, no thanks. So yes, after William is declared dead, the company would have gone to Henry, but since Henry has no relatives remaining, at the end of FNAF 6 at least, the IP of Freddy Fazbear and his friends would have gone to the state of Utah, which would have been sold or licensed to whoever bought it, because, you know, they wanted to open the Mega Pizzaplex, which is a whole other question in and of itself, because, like, they ended up building it right where Afton needed it to be, so who really bought it, that's a question for another day. And unless Michael somehow had a kid of his own and then the state decided to give it to them, both of which are unlikely, since it would have been Henry's company after that, or even if it didn't go to Henry 100%, Michael still didn't have any kids. The state would definitely be the ones who would own the franchise and would sell it to the highest bidder without a second thought, because let's be honest, literally any state would do that, despite the amount of kids who have died in these restaurants. Also, fun fact, at the time he dies, Michael Afton is like 50 years old. Because assuming Michael is a teenager, or at least closer to it, in FNAF 4, that takes place in 1983, then FNAF 1 takes place in 1993, so at this point he would be at least 20, considering everything else. Then the place closes down and doesn't reopen for another 30 years until FNAF 3. So by FNAF 3, he is already 50. Michael is already 50 years old in FNAF 3, and then however long it takes for them to get to FNAF 6 after that. So Michael Afton is at least 50 years old, which is actually insane. So who knows how old William is? I don't want to know. But ultimately, in at number 2, replaced. Oh yeah, don't forget your bones being replaced with metal ones. Yeah, like sure, there's surgery for people who need repairs or replacements, okay? I think like hip replacements are probably the most common actually. However, those have whole processes behind them to ensure a fast recovery and, you know, survival, not being infected. All of a sudden being shoved full of metal bones where normal ones used to be, that's a guaranteed infection at the very least, especially considering how, you know, your normal bones have to go somewhere else. And whether they're just crushed and then spread out inside you or just pushed out the other side, you're going to be in a hell of a lot of pain. Plus, you know, probably not alive, which I guess is a good thing, since you won't really have to deal with the intense pain for too long, hopefully. But this actually makes me think, if you replace all of your bones with metal ones, are you still you? Is this like a Ship of Theseus moment? Am I about to have like a WandaVision finale? Or like, are we just our brain? And if we are our brain, does that mean that if we have a brain transplant, do we become another person despite it still being my body? And does that mean that we're just like a brain piloting a bone mech with meat armor? Oh no, existential crisis. And finally, in at number 1, death. I mean, don't get me wrong, okay? But the worst thing about a spring lock failure has to be the whole death part, right? Ignore my mumbling. I mean, honestly, okay, it's obviously not for some of you, given the whole comments thing earlier, but the only reason you wouldn't die in a spring lock suit is because you're a main character and need to be around for the story. And then you're just in agonizing pain for the rest of your life. Yeah, the only people who have survived a spring lock failure, well, confirmed, is William. So, yeah, and you know, he's like the main antagonist of the game and was only able to survive since the spirit of a victim was keeping him alive. And in the books, William also ended up getting spring-locked before, but then got out of the suit, since Dave Miller, who was revealed to be William, has scars from a previous spring-lock failure from before he becomes spring-trapped in the books. So the only one who can ever really survive seems to be William, and he's survived it twice. Anyone else is boned, and personally, I'd rather not die by having millions of small metal bits and several dozen large ones shoved into my body, trying to replace my body. I would rather die peacefully in my sleep with Chica's hand around my throat. In at 10, Devin. The story, The New Kid from 1:35 a.m., the third Fazbear Frights book, revolves around Devin, Mick, and Kelsey. Devin and Mick are outcasts from their class, and they aren't really popular. You know, they aren't cool. But when the new kid Kelsey arrives, they try to make a new friend, despite Kelsey being incredibly charismatic and adored by everyone in the school. Over time, Devin grows jealous of Kelsey, since, you know, he has everything that he wants. So, in an act of revenge or in an effort to gain control, Devin hatches a plan to lure him to an abandoned Freddy Fazbear's and trap him in a spring-lock suit for a couple hours. To try and maybe, like, humble him, I guess. I don't know what the plan was here. But the plan, whatever it ended up being, goes incredibly wrong. After getting in the spring-lock suit, it fails, as expected, because, you know, it's a Fnaf book, causing blood to soak into the fur of the animatronic, and, you know what happens when a spring-lock fails. So, yeah. Devin and Mick leave Kelsey for dead so they won't get in trouble, but something doesn't feel right. So a week later, Devin returns to the scene of the crime like the idiot that he is, sticks his hand in the animatronic's mouth to try to find a body, and snap. The spring locks fail yet again because for some reason someone reset them, and as per usual, Devin gets his hand stuck inside the machine and bleeds out, but not before seeing black hair in the suit. Instead of blonde hair. Would you want to be spring locked? Hopefully you said no, but whatever you answered, the opposite will happen unless you like this video, okay? You got 5 seconds. 5, 4, 3. Thank you. See, there you go. Now you will either be spared or not, depending on your life choices, and probably previous trauma. Let's keep going. In at 9, you. Spoiler alert for a fan game, but if I say which fan game, it will spoil it. So if you want to avoid spoilers, skip to the next number, okay? I'll give you a chance to do that. Alright, now that you've prepared for the spoilers, A Shadow Over Freddy's is a FNAF fan game created by Fnaf on Game Jolt. It was released on the 25th of April 2018, and it was made by the same guy who's currently working on FNAF Plus, so you know it's going to be good. The gameplay of A Shadow Over Freddy's is a hybrid between a traditional point-and-click and a free-roaming horror game, so you click and it's flat. The player ends up waking up to find themselves with no memories and a Freddy Fazbear's Pizza and is tasked with surviving the 5 nights. The player is given different tasks and then you have to complete them before 6 a.m. and then getting out of the establishment. However, the ending of the game has you getting trapped in a spring-lock suit and being left to rot, meaning that you're a spring-lock victim, and I don't like that, so yeah, number 9. In at 8, Burn Trap. Well, yes, technically, Burn Trap themselves isn't a spring-lock victim, it's the most recent form of our main antagonist, and you know what, I want to hate on him real quick. Like, what is this man's problem? What is with this full-on Harvey Dent knockoff and is somehow still living ass and trying to take control of Freddy, okay? Like, what does that even do for him? Sure, he can use Freddy to get to us, but this man is also just at the end of the hall, okay? He can just crawl through the vent like Monty does, and then you'd be able to get to us. Even if we, like, close the vent, we can't have it closed forever. That's why there's a power bar next to it. So why couldn't you just wait it out and then tear Gregory to shreds yourself, you pansy? Come on, stop having your minions do everything for you. Where's the William Afton that everyone was scared of, huh? Like that little spring locking made you that much of a little bitch? Like, come on, dude. Okay, you're a grown man, and I'm the size of a 4-year-old. Why are you so scared? Because of the robot that's running on low power after glitching out? He should be on bed rest, not trying to help a kid, okay? He can't even take on multiple staff bots. Have your minions take Freddy and then deal with me yourself, okay? You say you always come back, but apparently every time you do, it's as just that little bit more of a pussy, okay? Burn trap, more like just burn. And it's 7 required. The springlock suits themselves are an occupational hazard that they didn't really need to create. Like, these things are hella deadly, and both William and Henry allow for their employees to wear them. Like, goddamn, okay? Just make a separate suit for the animatronic characters, for the employees, okay? Like, the people who run your business. You know, they are the ones who make you the money, so, you know, they don't end up dying from robotic parts replacing their internal organs. OSHA would have been all over these goddamn suits if it was real in this universe, but apparently I guess it's not. And honestly, it's probably required by your contract to wear these suits at work. And if you refuse, you're probably gonna get fired, especially considering how they started getting ready to fire Jeremy because he saw Glitch Trap in Help Wanted. So why wouldn't they fire you for not wearing your suit if it's in your contract? Even if you claim it was to protect your life, they'd find another reason that you couldn't really fight against, so. Especially, you know, when a serial killer is the CEO. And its 6 implications. Now, while the term springlock is used in real life, it's totally different from the actual FNAF mechanism. I'm certain most of you got the whole springlocks are real line from Springlocks and You, How Not to Die Remastered. It's a thread on the FNAF wiki. However, actual springlocks are just locks that use springs, okay? From my research, what I gathered is that a spring lock in real life is, in simplest terms, a spring lock. It's like if your front door's deadbolt was on a spring. Every other instance talking about real spring locks or just ends up bringing you back or quotes this page, so it's kind of circular logic, okay? You can't use evidence within the thing that you're trying to prove as proof that it is real. It's like plugging a power bar into itself. It doesn't work. You can't use the same article to prove that spring locks are real, okay? Because they're not. At least their game form isn't. But if the spring lock failure was real, I think the implications of, like, all of this being real in general is like one of the worst things. You get it? Like, it's definitely in the top 10. Get it? It's a little meta content joke for you because this is a top 10 list. It's in the top 10. Halfway through into number 5, comments. I've mentioned this in previous videos, mostly to explain why there won't ever be an actual real FNAF restaurant that you'll be able to walk into, and it still remains true since we're only getting a virtual diner that you can only order online. However, I think that one of the worst things still, and especially when it comes to these suits, is the goddamn comments about them. You wanna know a comment that I saw yesterday? Well, yesterday for me as I was writing this, Wednesday for you. Okay, I saw someone say that they want to be spring-locked. What? Why? Why would you want to be spring-locked? Do you know how messed up that is? You're saying that you want to be killed by this thing? Because there's some hotlines that you should call. Like, why on sweet heaven's earth would you want to be spring-locked? Do you know how absolutely agonizingly painful that would be? That would be one of the worst things imaginable, okay? Holy sweet Lord baby Jesus W. Christ. That would be one of the worst ways to go, if not the worst way. At least, like, as far as, like, actually could happen goes, I think, at least, okay? Because, like, a volcano would suck, but it's a bit unrealistic. It's a bad idea, okay? Stop doing this. Stop saying this. Okay, talk to a doctor. And for Afton, I talked about how the implications would apply to like how everything in FNAF would have happened in real life if one of these was real, but one of the worst implications would be that Afton was real. This man has caused me enough pain and suffering already. I don't need him to be like an actual person, especially considering how Springtrap would be set loose next year. And then everything after it would happen. This channel would probably be a true crime channel and not a gaming channel. I'd probably have tried proving it myself and maybe even become a PI so that I can do so. But straight up, this man has already caused me enough grief and suffering and loss and tears of pain at night in my life, and it's made me lose enough of it already to him. So yeah, him being real would just be the worst thing that I can imagine for me. However, that's only if the springlock failure thing was also real. There are worse things for people in the FNAF universe though, not in real life, such as in at 3, getting close to the end, in at number 3, Garvey. a psychopathic, cold-blooded killer. He stopped being human long ago. That's how Garvey is described in the extras for Domitibus, okay? The game from which he is the penultimate antagonist of. As a human, he was the man who killed the missing children and then later went on to get trapped in Spring Bonnie, becoming Springtrap, and then was burned to a permanent death in the Fazbear Frights fire, which is where the two timelines start to separate. Garvey is a more gory version of Springtrap from FNAF 3, obviously. However, it's not actually William Afton, since the game was released before the name reveal and even before FNAF 4. Springtrap, but with hardly any exosuit or animatronic casing, whatever you want to freaking call it. He crawls on all fours and uses his left hand as a foot and his left foot as a hand, like some demon spider monkey from the deepest pits of hell that Satan didn't sanction the creation of. Like, Jesus Christ, I don't understand how this thing wants to operate, but honestly, I don't want to know, okay? This creation is a monstrosity that haunts my nightmares, and it's haunting my nightmares even more so than all my actual real-world trauma combined. So, I don't know, okay? Maybe Garvey's just there more because it's just, like, at this point, my mental health has gotten to the point where he's basically a visual representation of my damage. But either way, it's terrifying. But ultimately, in at number 2, Springtrap. I'm pretty sure we all know this story by now. There we go. Finally, I'm kidding. Everything was going well at first, okay? They couldn't pin him down, he was on his way to immortality, but once William Afton discovered Remnant, he spiraled. He wanted to use it to fuel his life and make himself truly immortal, so in an effort to study it further, William lures the possessed animatronics to a back room so that he can access and dismantle them, and then using their endoskeletons to melt them down and make some soul-infused metal BS. However, by doing this, he releases the souls of his own victims, and you know, he gets reasonably scared, so he crawls inside of his Spring Bonnie suit, trying to make himself feel more powerful, and then he gets killed, and yeah, and then he's in agony for 30 years, and that's, you know what, he deserved it. He deserved it. I mean, he doesn't die from it, but he definitely deserved to be in pain. And you know what, that makes him deserving of the number 2 slot, alright? And finally, in at number 1, The Twisted Ones. The Twisted Ones novel starts a year after the Silver Eyes ended with Charlie in university. However, one day, Clay Burke comes to see Charlie and for some reason brings her to see a corpse with familiar wounds. This could be either because she would recognize them, or because she was working with the police, or because they just had to advance the plot. I don't know. I haven't read the original novels, and at this point I don't really want to. However, looking at the wounds, she can confirm that they are in fact from a spring-lock failure, despite some not having any actual experience with forensics. But that means that we do have an unnamed Springlock victim in the Twisted Ones novel. And if this character does have a name, please let me know in the comments because I can't find one online. However, I also had to kind of rush to get this list, so maybe I didn't look enough. Who knows? It might have been William, it might not have been, I don't know. And there was also fake blood, and they realized that Afton faked everything so that he couldn't be caught as a serial killer. I don't know, okay? It's stupid. William needs to die. Stop bringing him back. This is like a show like Criminal Minds, bringing a serial killer back after giving him a lethal injection for the 4th time. Okay, I don't get it. Stop doing it. But there you have it. Okay, that's how Freddy Fazbear's reopened so much, and that's how it's still around even after everyone associated with the company has died. Not everyone who remembers. Henry should have really thought that one through, but what a wonderful world we live in, huh? If only Henry had named someone that he trusted as the CEO so that none of this could actually reopen or continue. Oh wait, that's right. You burned the one person who also wanted all of this to end and never happen again. All because you assumed that he wanted to die so that nobody would remember. Hey bozo! The parents of the victims remember, and a load of other people do too. It was kind of a big issue in your universe. So, Henry will forever and always be the dumbest character in FNAF history, and you can't change my mind on that, okay? Because no matter what stupid things William has done, at the very least he got away with it. He got the outcome he wanted. Henry's just dumb.